The night was unusually cold for sunny Florida, and Lucas Miller felt the biting, humid air as he dragged the large, black trash bag to the dumpster behind the quick-serve gas station. His breath condensed into small clouds in the chilly air, quickly dissipating in the gloom beneath the buzzing yellow security lamp overhead. His shoulders ached slightly, a remnant of hours spent standing behind the counter, and the monotony of the night shift weighed heavily. But on this night, something broke the routine. As he closed the dumpster lid with a dull thud, his eyes scanned the darkest corner of the brick wall. There, huddled against the wall, was a figure. It was an elderly man, with a tangled gray beard that seemed longer than usual, and his thin frame was wrapped in layers of old, mismatched clothing, a torn flannel shirt, a worn jacket, and beneath them, pieces of what looked like a thin blanket. His shoes, Lucas noticed, were patched with duct tape, a silent testament to a hard life. The man's hands trembled visibly as he tried, with an almost desperate persistence, to open a crumpled plastic bag. What was he searching for? Lucas realized with a lump in his throat, it was just a few pieces of stale bread, discarded. Under the flickering street lamp, the man's eyes, previously fixed on the stubborn packaging, lifted and met Lucas's. They were tired, yes, but carried a depth that went beyond hunger, an untold story, a wisdom perhaps forged by pain, like an ocean of memories no one had asked to hear. Lucas froze. The gas station rules were clear, hammered into every new employee by the manager, Arthur Benson: no handouts, no free coffee, no perks. We're not a charity, Miller. We're a business. Keep the vagrants off the property. The memory of last year's incident, when a colleague had been summarily fired for giving a tuna sandwich to someone outside, echoed in Lucas's mind, a chilling warning. But what he saw now wasn't an aggressive panhandler or someone causing trouble. It was a man trying to survive, desperately searching for scraps in the trash to quiet the gnawing hunger that, Lucas could imagine, must be consuming him from within. His mind raced. He could have turned back, slipped inside the station, pretended he hadn't seen anything. He could have kept his job safe, his small bubble of stability in a life he'd fought so hard to rebuild. Or he could break the rules. The decision came before he even realized he'd made it. Lucas turned around. The gas station was eerily silent, only the low, steady hum of the refrigeration units keeping drinks cold. Lucas walked to the coffee machine, which was already turned off for the night. He took a deep breath and switched it on, the strong, comforting aroma of fresh coffee beginning to spread through the air. Next, he went to the deli counter, where pre-made sandwiches sat under a plastic cover. He picked up a turkey sandwich, wrapped in film. Finally, he opened his locker in the back, rummaging through it until he found an old fleece jacket he wore on colder days. It was simple, worn, but warm. One by one, he rang up the items at the register, swiping his own debit card. He tucked the receipt into his pocket as if it were an important secret, a small act of silent rebellion. When he stepped back out into the cutting cold, the old man was still there, exactly where Lucas had left him. His hands continued to tremble, his face etched with weariness and hunger. "Sir," Lucas said quietly, his voice almost a whisper in the breeze. He knelt gently, placing the items carefully on the ground between them. "I thought you might want something warm." The old man's head lifted again, his eyes wide with surprise, a mix of caution and disbelief in his gaze. "I can't pay you, son," he murmured, his voice hoarse from disuse. "It's already taken care of," Lucas replied softly, stepping back to give the man space. In that moment, as Lucas watched the man's hesitant hand reach for the steaming coffee and the sandwich, he felt the weight of something far greater than the gas station's rules. Society had largely trained us to look away. To walk past the homeless, the hungry, the invisible. We scroll past tragedy on our phones, walk past suffering on the street, telling ourselves it's someone else's problem. But in that brief, silent exchange between two strangers in the cold pre-dawn, Lucas pushed back against that numbness, that moral anesthesia. And unbeknownst to him, his small act of kindness had ignited a spark. A spark that would not only alleviate a man's hunger but send a ripple effect that would change both their lives forever. It was the beginning of an unexpected journey, far beyond a night shift at a gas station. Lucas Miller never imagined his life would lead to the dim glow of a gas station's night shift. Growing up in a small town outside Orlando, Florida, Lucas had always been the kid with a notebook in his pocket, scribbling down stories and interviewing anyone who would talk to him, from the local baker to his high school janitor. His dream was clear: to become a reporter, to tell the stories that mattered, and to give voice to those who went unheard. By the time he enrolled at the University of Florida, he was well on his way. Lucas threw himself into journalism classes, balancing a 3.9 GPA with long hours at the student paper. He was passionate, tireless, and hopeful. His professors saw a spark in him, and his classmates often joked that Lucas would be the one they'd see reporting on national news within a few years. But life has a way of rewriting dreams without warning. When Lucas was in his junior year, his father, Mark, was diagnosed with ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, a progressive and unforgiving disease. A former construction foreman, Mark had been Lucas's hero, a man of quiet strength whose hands could build a house and whose laugh could fill a room. Watching his father's body betray him was a heartbreak Lucas could never have prepared for. At first, Lucas tried to juggle it all, racing between classes, study sessions, and weekend trips home to help. But soon the trips became longer, the calls more urgent, and the responsibilities heavier. His grades slipped, his internships fell away, and eventually, Lucas made the painful decision to leave school altogether. He packed up his dreams and came home to be a full-time caregiver. For 2 years, Lucas became his father's hands and feet, feeding him, lifting him, comforting him on the darkest nights. He witnessed his father's unwavering strength, even as the disease stole him away, piece by piece. Those years were a blur of love, exhaustion, and a silent grief that seemed to have no end. When Mark passed away, Lucas was left not just grieving, but broke, with student debt and no degree to show for it. The loss of his father, combined with the financial burden, crushed him. Many people saw Lucas at the gas station and assumed they knew his story, just another kid who never made it out of town, working a dead-end job with no ambition. But they never saw the years of sacrifice, the heartache, or the unconditional love that pulled him away from his path. That's the thing about ordinary workers: their hidden struggles, the burdens they carry without fanfare, the dreams they put on hold for family. Lucas's life, like so many others, was a quiet testimony to the resilience and quiet heroism that too often goes unseen. And though his dreams had been delayed, they were far from gone. They were merely waiting for the right moment to bloom again. The sharp jingle of Arthur Benson's keys announced his arrival before Lucas even saw him. Arthur's silver BMW, always pristine, screeched into the gas station lot, headlights glaring like a pair of cold, accusing eyes. Lucas, who had just returned to the counter after his trip to the dumpster, felt a chill run down his spine. He knew Arthur had eyes everywhere, and the feeling of constant surveillance was something he had grown accustomed to, but not to this extent. Arthur's heavy footsteps, echoing on the tiled floor, approached Lucas from behind. Arthur didn't waste time with pleasantries. His voice was cutting, slicing through the stillness of the predawn like an icy blade. "Did you give him food, Miller?" Lucas slowly turned, his heart pounding in his chest. Despite the cold night, sweat began to prickle his back. His throat was dry, but he forced himself to nod. He wasn't going to lie. "I paid for it myself," Lucas quickly added, pulling the receipt from his pocket like a shield against the impending anger. It was proof, a mitigating factor. Arthur snatched the receipt from Lucas's hand, barely glancing at it, his eyes fixed on Lucas's. "We have rules for a reason, Miller. You think you're doing him a favor, but all you're doing is making this place a magnet for every stray in the county." Arthur's voice was rising in volume, and Lucas felt the words like stones. Lucas's jaw tightened. He could feel anger bubbling up inside him, but he kept it in check. "He was just trying to eat, Arthur," he said, his voice firm despite the tremor in his hands. I couldn't just ignore him. Arthur's face hardened, his expression becoming an impenetrable mask of corporate authority. That's not your call, Miller. You're here to run the register, stock the shelves, clean the bathroom. You're not here to save the world. The words hit him hard, but Lucas stood his ground. I didn't do it to save the world, Lucas retorted, his voice rising slightly. I did it because it was the right thing to do. Because he was a human being, hungry and cold. For a split second, Arthur seemed taken aback, perhaps even slightly rattled by Lucas's conviction. But the moment quickly passed, replaced by the familiar coldness of his authority. Then you're done here, Arthur said flatly, his voice lower now, but carrying a chilling finality. He pulled a termination form from his clipboard, already filled out with Lucas's name and the date. Finish your shift. Don't come back. Your final checks will be mailed to you. As Arthur turned and walked toward his office door, Lucas felt an uncontrollable tremble in his hands. A sharp ache pierced his chest, not just the disappointment of losing his job, but the injustice, the sheer lack of understanding. No matter what, under the fear and disappointment, something else flickered within Lucas, a quiet, unwavering resolve. He had known the risk. He had carefully weighed the consequences of his actions. And he had chosen to act anyway, driven by a moral compass that Arthur clearly lacked. And though the consequences were harsh, Lucas felt no regret. He had acted according to his values, and that, in itself, was a strange comfort. It was a familiar pattern in places like this, Lucas thought. Policies and procedures rigidly enforced, often wrapped so tightly around the heart of a business that they ended up suffocating any space for compassion. Rules kept operations smooth, costs low, and managers like Arthur in control. But they also created a kind of moral blindness, turning employees into cogs in a machine that valued efficiency and profit above humanity. Lucas understood that Arthur wasn't a villain in the classic sense, he was a man trained to see the world through numbers, to keep the store profitable, to prevent disruptions. He was doing what was expected of him. But Lucas also knew that when we allow rules to choke out kindness, we start to lose something essential, the ability to recognize the dignity in each other, to see beyond the uniform, the job title, or the outward appearance. As the hours dragged on toward morning, Lucas worked in silence. The memory of the old man's eyes, tired yet filled with gratitude, carried him through. His sense that he had done the right thing remained unshaken, even as his job slipped through his fingers. He had no idea what he would do next, but strangely, there was a newfound clarity in his mind. He had done what was human, and that was enough. By mid-afternoon the next day, Lucas's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It had been silent all morning. He'd been trying to shake off the weight of the night, filling out a few job applications between sips of lukewarm coffee. The unfamiliar number lit up on the screen. He hesitated for a moment, his fingertips hovering over the answer button. His life didn't typically involve important calls. "Hello?" he said cautiously as he answered. "Is this Lucas Miller?" a calm, professional voice asked from the other end. It was female, but with a tone that denoted seriousness. "Yes, this is Lucas," he replied, a hint of apprehension in his voice. "This is Monica Silva, I'm with the Veterans Affairs Department. I was hoping we could speak for a few minutes." Lucas's brow furrowed, confusion setting in. "Veterans Affairs? I think you have the wrong person." His father had been a veteran, but that was years ago, and he'd never had contact with the department. "I don't believe so," Monica replied gently, but with an underlying firmness. "I understand you assisted an individual outside your workplace last night." Lucas's chest tightened. He immediately thought back to the old man by the dumpster. Could this actually be connected? His simple, impulsive act, somehow tied to a government organization? The idea seemed surreal. "I didn't do much," Lucas murmured, his voice low. He was cold, hungry. I just gave him a sandwich and a jacket." There was a significant pause on the other end of the line, which Lucas interpreted as hesitation, perhaps even disapproval. But when Monica spoke again, her voice carried an unexpected weight. "That act, Mr. Miller, meant more than you realize. The man you helped was not just another person on the street. He's someone our department has been trying to locate for months. He's of significant importance to us." Lucas's pulse quickened. The air seemed to grow thinner in his lungs. "Who is he?" he asked, barely able to contain the urgency in his voice. "I'd like to explain that in person," Monica said, her voice now more direct and purposeful. "Can you meet me at our Tampa office tomorrow morning? It's of utmost importance." When Lucas ended the call, a strange swirl of confusion and a pang of unease settled over him. He had seen many people come and go outside the gas station, drifters, runaways, travelers down on their luck. But there had been something about that old man, something that lingered in Lucas's memory, the quiet dignity in his eyes, the way he'd offered a perfect, almost reflexive salute before disappearing into the dark. A gesture of respect that seemed out of place for someone in his current predicament. It made Lucas realize just how easy it is to overlook people on the margins of society. We pass by veterans every day, sitting on park benches, sleeping under bridges, clutching cardboard signs at intersections. Once they wore uniforms, bore the weight of duty, the pride of service. Now, they often walk invisible among us, their struggles drowned out by the noise of busy lives. Apathy is a current that pulls us along, and it's easy to be carried by it, telling ourselves it's not our responsibility. Lucas thought of his own father's battle with ALS, how quickly people's sympathy faded when the disease stole away his voice, his mobility, his independence. The old man at the gas station wasn't just another face on the street, he was someone's father, someone's brother, someone who had once stood strong, until life knocked him down. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, Lucas understood something had fundamentally shifted. What he thought was just a small, unassuming moment of kindness, without consequence, was now unraveling into something far larger. And he was right at the center of it. A strange feeling, a mix of nervousness and a hint of excitement, took hold of him. Life, suddenly, had become unexpectedly complex, yet also, somehow, more meaningful. The morning unfolded like a scene from a movie. Lucas had barely slept, his mind racing through Monica Silva's strange phone call. He tried to gather his thoughts, sipping his coffee, when the sound of engines rumbled outside. He stepped onto the front porch of his small home just in time to see 6 sturdy military vehicles, imposing Humvees, roll down his quiet street, their tires crunching over the asphalt with a heavy sound. Curious neighbors peered through curtains, a few ventured onto their porches, phones already raised to capture the bizarre moment. The convoy turned onto the main road, its destination clear. At the gas station where Lucas had worked just hours ago, the Humvees pulled into the lot with military precision, their dark silhouettes contrasting with the morning sky. Passers-by froze mid-pump, wide-eyed, as uniformed Marines filed out in sharp formation. The commanding figure at the center of the formation was General Samuel Harris, tall and distinguished, his chest gleaming with rows of medals. His expression was calm, yet purposeful. When Lucas arrived on the scene, the small gas station had already transformed into the center of public attention. Reporters, curious onlookers, and nervous employees gathered outside, whispering wild theories. Social media had already exploded, videos of the Humvees, snapshots of the Marines, hashtags like #GasStationHero and #Marines in Tampa were trending within hours. General Harris stood inside the store, speaking quietly with Monica Silva and a few stiff-looking corporate executives. When Lucas entered, the general turned, his gaze steady but kind. "You must be Lucas Miller," Harris said, extending his hand. Lucas shook it cautiously, still trying to comprehend the gravity of the moment. "Yes, sir. But I'm just a gas station attendant, General. I don't understand." "Not today, you're not," the general interrupted him with a faint smile. Today, you're the man who helped bring home one of our own. A hero we thought we'd lost forever." Lucas's stomach flipped. "Who was he?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Major General Walter Green," Harris said quietly, his voice imbued with reverence and sorrow. "A decorated officer, a true giant in our service, retired after suffering a severe traumatic brain injury in combat. He wandered from his care facility months ago. We searched tirelessly, put out alerts nationwide, but it was your simple, unassuming act of kindness, Lucas, that finally brought him home." Lucas's throat tightened. The memory of the old man, his quiet dignity, the almost imperceptible salute, the faint figure disappearing into the dark, it all came rushing back with a new, overwhelming weight. Harris continued, his voice firm yet thoughtful. He was addressing not just Lucas, but everyone present, the executives in their expensive suits, the reporters with their cameras, the public observing from afar. "It's easy to think that systems are what change the world," he said. "Big organizations, government policies, complex laws. But sometimes all it takes is one person doing the right thing when no one's watching. That, Lucas, is what cuts through red tape, what reminds people of their humanity. That's what brings our heroes home." Lucas looked around the store. Where he had stocked shelves and mopped floors for so many hours, it was now a stage for something extraordinary. People who once barely noticed his presence were now filming his every move, their faces filled with awe and curiosity. The Marines hadn't come for punishment or spectacle, they had come to honor a moment that society often overlooks, a quiet, selfless decision made in the cold, when the temptation to ignore was great, and the personal consequences immediate. As Lucas stood there, in the center of an attention he never sought, he realized something profound: compassion has the power to challenge even the most rigid systems. Rules can be rewritten, large corporations can change course, and all it takes, sometimes, is one small act of decency to remind everyone what truly matters. That gas station, which was just a stopping point, had become an unexpected beacon of humanity. Lucas stood near the gas station pump, squinting under the bright midday sun, feeling awkwardly exposed in the center of a crowd he never imagined would gather for him. Just a day ago, he was a faceless night shift worker, a young man whom most customers barely glanced at while buying coffee or lottery tickets. Now, a podium had been set up near the store, flanked by military flags, microphones, and camera crews. Brigadier General Samuel Harris approached the microphone, his voice clear and strong as it carried across the lot. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice laden with gravity and pride, "today, we recognize that heroism often comes in the quietest forms." He paused, allowing murmurs of agreement to ripple through the crowd. Lucas Miller, with no obligation, no promise of recognition, and at the cost of his own job, chose to help a man in need. The general's voice took on a more solemn tone. That man, by chance, happened to be one of our own, Major General Walter Green. But that's not why Lucas's act matters. It matters because Lucas didn't know who he was, and yet, he helped anyway. Lucas's cheeks flushed as the general gestured for him to step forward. Applause erupted, startling in its force and volume. His legs felt heavy as he walked toward the small platform, his heart thudding so hard it felt like it might burst through his chest. General Harris pinned a civilian service medal, gleaming gold against the fabric of his shirt. Lucas barely heard the citation read aloud, his mind swirling with incredulity. He hadn't set out to make a statement, to challenge rules, or to gain attention. He had simply seen a man who was cold and hungry, and he acted. Standing under the weight of the applause and the flashing cameras, Lucas struggled to reconcile the noise, the cameras, and the swelling headlines with the quiet, personal moment he had shared with an old man in the darkness. When Lucas finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost swallowed by the gentle breeze. "I didn't know who he was," he admitted to the crowd, his words simple and honest, without pretense. "I didn't think of this as anything heroic. I just thought if it were me, or my dad, or anyone I cared about, I'd want someone to stop and care." What struck Lucas most was how many people now praised something so simple: a sandwich, a coffee, a jacket, and a moment of human connection. It made him reflect on all the unseen acts of goodness that happen every day: the nurse who stays past her shift to comfort a patient, the teacher who buys lunch for a student who forgot their wallet, the neighbor who checks on someone's aging parent. None of them make headlines, none receive medals at public ceremonies, but they are the quiet stitching that holds society together, the invisible fabric of compassion. True heroism, Lucas realized, often goes unnoticed. It doesn't come with medals or ceremonies. It's the choice to act when it's easier to look away, the choice to see another's humanity when the world tells you to keep moving. As the cameras flashed and the reporters shouted his name, Lucas felt a mix of humility and a new, profound resolve. He hadn't just stumbled into a viral moment, he had stumbled into a deeper truth, that quiet, ordinary acts of care hold extraordinary power. Arthur Benson had never been a man to apologize. For years, he ran the gas station with strict, almost military efficiency. Rules were rules, and kindness, in his pragmatic mind, was a slippery slope to chaos. He prided himself on keeping things in order, on hitting targets, on making sure no one cut corners. For Arthur, there was a right way to do things, and sentimentality had no place in business. But after the media storm, after the Humvees rolled away and the headlines cooled, Arthur was left standing in his quiet, near-empty store, staring at the spot where Lucas had once brewed coffee, where customers now lingered just a little longer, whispering about the kid who made a difference. And, for the first time in a long time, Arthur felt something he couldn't simply ignore or brush aside: shame. He had fired a man for helping someone. He hadn't even paused to ask why. The image of General Harris, with his medals, and Lucas's unwavering simplicity haunted him. The first time Arthur approached Lucas again, it was at the new veteran center that had been set up in partnership with the gas station chain, now proudly rebranded as Patriot Stop. Arthur walked in wearing his usual button-down shirt and polished shoes, feeling strangely awkward and out of place among the relaxed crowd of veterans, who were drinking free coffee, laughing, and sharing stories. Lucas looked up from a folding table where he was helping sort supplies. Their eyes met, and for a moment Arthur thought about simply turning around and walking right back out. But he didn't. Arthur cleared his throat, shifting his weight uncomfortably. I was wondering if you didn't need another pair of hands around here. Lucas gave him a long, measured look, a look that wasn't angry, nor smug, just quiet and observant. Then, he offered a simple nod. Sure, Arthur, he said, his voice free of resentment. We can use the help. At first, Arthur fumbled. He awkwardly set out chairs, rigidly organized donation bins, and poured coffee with a heavy hand. He was stiff, clumsy, overly formal, as if performing an audit task rather than helping out. But, over the weeks, something in Arthur began to soften. He sat down and listened to the veteran stories, their wartime experiences, their struggles with transition, their joys and their losses. He learned their names, heard about their families, their hardships, and their triumphs. Slowly, the man who once ran his store like a drill sergeant began to understand something Lucas had known all along: people matter more than policies. Human connection is worth more than a financial balance sheet. Arthur's apologies came in small ways, not in grand speeches or public gestures. It was in staying late to help clean up, long after his shift was over. It was in offering to drive a veteran to a doctor's appointment, or helping to carry heavy boxes to the center. It was in showing up again and again, not because a camera was watching, but because his heart had shifted. Personal growth, Arthur learned, is rarely a lightning strike. It's a series of small, sometimes awkward steps, choosing to show up when you don't have to listen when it's easier to turn away, to admit when you were wrong and do the work to make things right. Redemption, like heroism, often happens in the quiet places and over time. Arthur wasn't just earning back Lucas's respect, he was rediscovering his own humanity. The transformation of the little gas station on the corner was nothing short of remarkable. What was once just a forgettable quick stop, a place where commuters grabbed coffee, snacks, and gas without a second glance, had become something entirely new, the Patriot Stop. It was a vibrant hub, dedicated to serving and honoring veterans in the community. Large, bright banners hung proudly over the main entrance, and a new sign welcomed, "Welcome, veterans. Coffee's on us." Inside the station, an entire corner had been redesigned into a cozy lounge, complete with comfortable chairs, military service flags hanging proudly on the wall, and a bookshelf stacked with donated novels, military history books, and local newspapers. A bulletin board offered valuable resources, job opportunities, counseling services for PTSD and mental health, information on benefits, and a schedule of upcoming veteran events. But the most remarkable change wasn't the decor or the new offerings, it was the spirit within the place. Customers lingered longer. Regulars struck up conversations with veterans they once would have walked past without a second glance. Volunteers, including Arthur Benson himself, now fully engaged, helped run donation drives for winter coats and personal hygiene kits. The station was no longer just a gas station, it had become a gathering place, a beacon of support, and a tangible proof that no one should be invisible. The Patriot Stop was a small but powerful reminder that the community cared. At the heart of all this transformation was Lucas Miller. After the media attention faded and the applause subsided, Lucas found himself at a crossroads. For the first time in a long while, doors opened for him. Job offers had poured in, some from companies eager to ride the wave of his sudden fame, others from nonprofit organizations eager for his help in community programs. But Lucas knew exactly where his heart pulled him, a passion that had been suppressed for years. With the help of a local scholarship fund, created by community members who were touched by his story, Lucas finally returned to college to finish his journalism degree. But he didn't walk away from the Patriot Stop. Instead, he worked part-time, overseeing the veteran outreach program that had been born from his simple act of kindness. Lucas coordinated events at Patriot Stop, helped connect veterans with the services they needed, and even launched a blog where he wrote about the people he met, their stories of service, resilience, and, above all, the power of community. He discovered that journalism wasn't just about headlines and bylines, it was about listening, about amplifying the voices that too often were silenced or ignored, and about reminding people of the innate power of ordinary lives. There was something profound in how the Patriot Stop model rippled beyond its walls. Other local businesses began to notice and draw inspiration. The diner down the street started offering special discounts for veterans. A nearby barber began hosting free haircut days for former service members. The community was awakening to the quiet truth that compassion doesn't need to be a singular, fleeting headline, it can be woven into the everyday fabric of life, creating a culture of sustainable kindness. Lucas realized that lasting kindness isn't about grand, heroic gestures or viral moments. It's about building systems and spaces where empathy is part of the culture, where helping one another isn't a memorable exception, but an ingrained expectation. It's easy to be cynical, to believe the world is too divided or indifferent to truly change. But standing in the center of the transformed gas station, watching a young Marine and an elderly Vietnam veteran laugh openly over steaming cups of coffee, Lucas understood something simple yet eternally true: a single act of kindness can ignite a spark, can start a movement. But it's the unwavering commitment to keep showing up, to persist in compassion, that makes it last and grow, transforming lives and communities in ways we could never have foreseen. As we reach the end of Lucas Miller's extraordinary journey, we are powerfully reminded that the simplest acts of kindness have the power to leave the most lasting impact. In today's fast-paced, often fractured society, it's easy to get swept up in news cycles, polarizing political debates, and the personal struggles that consume us. But sometimes, it's the quiet, everyday choices we make, the decisions guided by our own sense of right and wrong, that reveal the true heart of our communities and the untapped potential of humanity. Lucas's decision to help a stranger wasn't driven by politics, money, or the desire for recognition. It was about dignity, about recognizing and valuing someone's humanity when the wider world, in its haste and indifference, preferred to look away. And that lesson speaks powerfully to modern life. When we choose to care, even for a brief moment, we push back against the current of indifference. We remind ourselves, and perhaps others, that goodness still holds a fundamental place in our world. Whether it's helping a neighbor, standing up for what's right, or simply showing patience and understanding in a world that always seems in a hurry, every small action contributes. But here's the question I want to leave you with, for your own reflection: what would you have done in Lucas's place? And even more importantly, when was the last time you reached out to someone in need simply because you could, expecting nothing in return? I invite you to share your thoughts and stories in the comments below. Have you ever witnessed or offered a small act of kindness that, unexpectedly, made a big difference in your life or someone else's? Or do you believe that kindness, in its purest sense, truly has the power to change entire systems and communities, or is it just a temporary ripple in an ocean of challenges? If this story touched you or sparked reflection, please give this video a like, subscribe to the channel for more meaningful stories, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that compassion is timeless and ageless. Let's keep this conversation going and inspire each other to be the quiet heroes our world so often needs.